Welcome back, everybody, or welcome to those that have not joined one of these Zoom meetings before. We've been holding these on a weekly basis and already heard some feedback that they've been helpful. I know they've been helpful for Joan and myself just to hear your feedback, and hopefully you're getting some good feedback to questions. I wish we had all the answers to them. We are getting more answers as time progresses, and hopefully we'll get more and more. We are inching forward to June 6th at this point. I think June 6th is our next time where we'll hear an update from Governor Baker. Of course, the expectation is that he'll give an announcement on when phase 2 starts. If it starts on June 8th as currently defined, or if there's any reason for that to be pushed out a few days. We don't know the answer to that, but current expectation is June 8th. So I think for the schedule for today, I think like last week, we're going to do a Q&A after we do a quick update on a few items. And I put into the chat at the top of the chat message, you'll see there's a method to raise your hand. If you look around on the participants list, there's a raise hand option. So when we open it up for a Q&A, you'll do a virtual raise hand. I'll be able to see that and unmute you and allow individuals to ask one question at a time. To get started, I think last Friday Governor Baker provided an announcement that many of you probably saw, and then saw some of the guidelines that were put out. They're called a preview of the guidelines for all lodging. And the guidelines for all lodging means all hotels, B&Bs, motels, and vacation rentals. So some of the guidelines, if you've sifted through, they're very broad in some areas. They don't apply to all rentals. So we did a deeper dive through that to see what really does apply to vacation rentals. And so I think, Joan, I'll just hand it off to you to provide the first update on a few specific items in there, a few specific common questions. The first one being our favorite topic on quarantine and what the quarantine guideline really means and what should homeowners be thinking about for that. Oh, Joan, you are still muted. Hold on.
Oh.
Start again. You are now up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, good. I think that is really the question of the hour, is this 14-day self-quarantine. And we just have to keep in mind, this is an advisory, it's recommended, it's even, they've used the word urged. They've had that in place since the end of March, and it still stays in place. I think that they are in a way hesitant to remove it. They are really aware of the importance of easing into the summer. And so I think this is one way of perhaps dissuading some people from coming, so as that there's not a huge influx of vacationers and even, you know, people who are just coming for the day or 3 days. But just remember, it's recommended. It's not mandatory. So what they are saying is that you have to, when you make the reservation with a guest, that you're supposed to tell them about this recommendation. But as we all know, if somebody's coming for a week, it'd be pretty hard to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. And what about a hotel where the average stay is about 2 or 3 nights? So I think we just have to keep that in mind and not take it as a requirement.
And it's not that. It's not a requirement. So it's the guidance by the language says that you're required to inform them of the guidance and the urging too. But I think the most important thing as homeowners that we should be thinking about is what else should you be telling them for their safety? And I think the goal would be to educate your guests as they're coming on what some of the safety standards are for the Cape and Islands. It may be making sure that they're well versed for what the beach rules are, or what the Mass state guidelines are. We'll provide a link to that we have on our site for some of the Mass state social distancing guidelines. that's to me the most important thing, is to ensure that all your guests are coming in understanding what it takes to be on the Cape and Islands, to vacation safely and to vacation responsibly. That to me is the number one criteria here. Joan, what about the required buffer time? So there's a statement in the guidelines, the preview of the guidelines, that say that all lodging needs to adhere to the required buffer time. So what does that all mean?
Well,
for rentals?
Right now it says, following each departure, consider leaving guest rooms vacant for 24 hours as part of the cleaning protocol. And just again, keep in mind that these guidelines are addressing a very broad lodging establishment, which includes hotels, motels, B&Bs, and obviously hotels and motels are much better equipped to be able to adhere to that and leave a room empty before allowing another guest to come in. Homes like ours, where it's week to week, we can't easily do that, especially if we have bookings in place. But what you could do is, if any of your guests feel uncomfortable and they ask you about this, you can certainly say, if you would feel more comfortable, you can come the next day, and we will reimburse you for the night that you're not here. But I doubt many guests will even say that. I think that in terms of having sufficient time between tenants, it's best to try to have 6 hours or so in between. It all depends on your individual circumstances, and in some cases you might ask your incoming guest to come in a little later if you don't feel you can provide the necessary sanitizing and disinfecting in the usual time allowed. So again, case by case basis.
I think that's one of the keys, is to communicate again with your guests. We mentioned this last time, is to make sure that you're communicating with your guests. If you already have bookings, make sure you reach out to them to understand where they're coming from, understand if they have any concerns. You could at that time relay what your new protocols will be, what sort of adjustments you've made for this summer, to give them some sort of reassurance. If there's any unease on their part about the time frame, the quick turnover, then as Joan mentioned, that's the opportunity to offer up a 24-hour, you come in the next day instead, and provide those alterations. As I've seen on a lot of the community chat boards, that people have been offering that, and most vacationers are saying, no, it's okay, like I'm comfortable with that. And clearly it's difficult for some, especially on the islands, who have to deal with the ferry reservations as well. So you really have to, the key is to talk to your guests that you've already booked, and for new bookings, make sure you're having this conversation with them. And if you can and are flexible to make adjustments to ease them, great. But also understand that most vacationers are trying to find a way to make this work under the standard 7-day stay. Joan, what about the guidelines we do expect to come out? Do you expect any additional guidelines on top? We've seen a preview. Do you think there are going to be any guidelines specific to vacation rentals that might come out? You mentioned like a 6-hour time frame. I think, do you see any specific vacation rental guidelines coming out?
Yeah, it's possible, but I have a feeling that what we have already seen is what it's going to be. I don't think there are going to be any surprises, as in more rigid rules or guidelines. And I have a sneaking suspicion that on Saturday we will only hear when short-term rentals can begin. And we may not hear more than that, because obviously he's addressing more than lodging in this press conference.
Okay, we will see. And I think Now, what about specific to the town? So we've been watching the Board of Selectmen meetings in various towns. There's been a lot of discussion. Specifically, the last week there was, or yesterday was Wellfleet. Last week was Truro. And do you think town by town, are there going to be restrictions that you believe might come out? Where do we stand with some of the restrictions town by town?
Again, I don't think that that is going to happen. I think that a few towns have already been very vocal in terms of their meetings with the selectmen, in terms of having some limitations to the minimum stay. Wellfleet and Truro, for instance, had considered establishing a 14 or 21 or even a 28-day minimum stay for short-term rentals. But they, from what I've heard, they've reached out to other surrounding towns, Eastham, Orleans, Chatham, Brewster, and haven't met. I think they were trying to get a consensus so that they could all group together and have these restrictions, but I don't think they've met with any acceptance on the part of the other towns. So I clearly don't see them wanting to set themselves apart and just issue restrictions for their particular town and none of the others going along with it. Could they do it? I suppose they could, but I just don't think that they will do it at this point. And I think Wellfleet has already decided that they will just wait and see what the governor says and then meet again next week.
Right. They're meeting again on Tuesday. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if rentals open up in Wellfleet on June 8th and then the select board meets again on June 9th. But again, I think it sounded like from the Wellfleet discussion that they were trying to both pull in not just short-term rentals, but hotels and motels along with any sort of restrictions. But to be determined if they want to enforce more restrictions that would be specific to that town. Hopefully not. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. As for this weekend, so on Saturday, the We Need a Vacation team has been meeting about what other information to provide to you to help you as this announcement comes out. And so you can expect on Saturday that you'll hear after the governor talks and we get the official announcement, we'll provide some more details about our analysis of what has transpired, what the opening rules are, and we'll provide some guidance on whether it be cleaning. We're going to be providing some cleaning guidelines and checklists to help with meeting whatever standards there are. So you can stay tuned for more updates from us this weekend after the governor talks. What I'd like to do is allow, Joan, anything else to add before we open it up to
No, I don't think so.
Questions? Okay. What I'd like to do here, like last week, is let people raise their hand and ask a question. Just there's 144 of us in here, so I can't unmute everybody at once. In order to raise your hand, I'm just seeing I put it up at the top of the chat. If you scroll up to the group chat, you'll see the top. It says, if you're on a desktop, most of you probably are, you can hit the participants, and at the bottom of the participant screen, you'll see a button that's called raise hand. So I see a few of you starting to come in. If you're on a smartphone, look at the comments, you'll find it there as well. Okay, raising hand is coming in. I'm going to start here and unmute Alice. You are first up. I'm going to click unmute. There we go. Alice, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for taking my question. I think maybe you've answered it as much as you can. We have a property in Wellfleet that we rent, and we're concerned about the possibility of the minimum stay requirements because we have obviously some people coming for just a week. And we also have been hearing about this proposed rental registry, and we're not sure, we don't know when that would take effect or what we would have to do about that.
Alice, there are many towns in the on the Cape that do require registration. And if you go to our FAQs for our lodging tax, you will see a link there, and I can send it to you if you can't find it, of the towns that already require registration. Some of them have required it for years, but never really reinforce it. So I have heard that Wellfleet is doing the same thing. Just requiring an annual registration, but along with that, perhaps an inspection, a safety inspection, for which the owner would probably be expected to pay. I know Mashpee just instituted that, both the mandatory registration and an annual safety check and home inspection. But, and some of these towns have required the home inspection for a while, and again, just haven't gotten around to doing it. Or, you know, it's just, they need enough staff to be able to do that on a regular basis. So I think some towns this year weren't even doing it. But, you know, I think more and more towns will probably institute that.
I think that one of the questions on the Wellfleet registration was the kind of the rules that were coming with that for registration, the restrictions that might come with each rental. And so the big question was just what would be the timing of that registration and the inspection? And is there going to be an inspection required to be registered? I see a chat from Pam here that's saying that no inspections this year for Wellfleet. I'm not sure if that's been confirmed. But that may, like, certainly if Wellfleet's asking for registration and inspection, that's a tall order to do, and when you might be accepting a guest next week. So right. I think that if there are questions or concerns specific to Wellfleet, I would certainly reach out to the Wellfleet Board of Selectmen and voice your concerns. And that's kind of our best recommendation on that on a town basis.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next up, Amy Craig. I'm going to unmute you. Amy, are you there?
I am. Hi, how are you today, Jeff, Alice, homeowners? How's everyone?
Good,
Hi, Amy. I'm not really Jeff, I'm Joan. I'm mislabeled.
Okay. So my question is, worst case scenario, what should we explain should be protocol should someone actually come down with coronavirus while staying in our house? And should we put that in our house manual? Because I know they're not supposed to go to the doctors in such case. So has anybody discussed what to actually do if somebody is in your house and comes down with something?
I think that we do address that in our is it a template that you can find when you go to our which blog is it, Jim? Help me out here. Or Beta, probably. You know, you wrote it.
I can't recall.
Yeah.
With the COVID.
But at any rate, what you should do is just inform your guests that if anyone in their party should come down with the virus or even suspect that they have it, that they really need to leave and go home. We were talking about this before before we started, and Jim had remarked that, you know, they probably would feel most comfortable at home anyway. They can't convalesce at your home, and then you would have to make sure that the entire home was really, you know, sanitized and disinfected completely. And you would also have to inform your incoming guests that someone was there who suspected of having the virus, and give them the opportunity to either delay their arrival or not come at all. I mean, it's an unfortunate situation, but it's one that we hope won't come up. But you just have to advise them that they can't stay there, and they have to notify you right away.
Of course. And if they're in a situation where they are not able to move should they go to the hospital?
Yes, yes, they would have to go to the hospital. Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. All right, next up, David Levinson. I'm going to unmute you. There we go.
So my question was the same about, whether we're asking people to do that. To the previous question about Wellfleet, my home's in Truro, but the Wellfleet Chamber of Commerce did distribute something on Monday evening about phase 2. So I can forward that to you guys at We Need a Vacation if you haven't gotten it, and then you can put it on your blog or something. But it has a lot of detail about the Wellfleet.
Was it anything, what specifically was?
I mean, I didn't, because on my home's in Truro, I didn't dig too deep into it, but it does, it's a fairly detailed document from the Wellfleet Chamber of Commerce. My brother used to own a B&B there, so he forwarded it to me.
David, we receive all communications from all of the
Chambers, so you already have it, okay.
including Wellfleet. So we did get one from Wellfleet just last week, and in it they were indicating that they were not in favor of a short-term limitation, and we were happy to see that.
Yeah. So this one is it was just Monday evening that was sent out. So my question is I think I got from the Massachusetts guidance that we're supposed to now register all of the names of the people that are staying in your home. Is that correct? That we're being required to have a directory of, I guess, for social tracing if necessary?
Yeah, it would be I mean, I would imagine that you have every guest that's coming in. But maybe if you only track the primary guest, if it's a family member, a single family, all you're tracking is that the head of, whoever did the booking with you.
Right.
If multiple families are joining, then yeah, I think it would be a good idea to ensure that you have the contact information for all families that are joined together, or if friends are coming together. I do think that is a good recommendation, just in the off chance that unfortunate situation were to come up where contact tracing was required. It would be a good thing to have. And I would throw on top of that, not just your guests, but create your list of people that might service the home. Anybody that's coming to the home to clean, linen service, any delivery service that might come into the home, you should just collect that information up front too. Just have it available for it.
And I'm also finding, because I've already started to make these requests, and I specify the number of people who are on the lease, and I say 6, and then now that I'm asking for a full list, it's coming out as 8 or 9, and they're saying, oh, I forgot to tell you about my niece and my cousin coming. So it just seems like it's not a bad idea to also kind of be able to enforce, if you have a big home, that they're not planning on bringing more than 10 people, and now you're in violation of the social gathering, 10 people or more.
Yeah, it's a good check on size of the party, ensuring that they're meeting whatever limitation you set on the party size.
Yep. Okay, so thank you. That was my question.
All right. Thanks, David. All right, I'm going to move on to, this is Pamela Lamlin. Unmute you.
Okay.
Landline.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. How are you, Pam?
Landline. I'm fine, thank you. I think you've actually answered it, but I just want to kind of go back to the point about minimum stays. And I'm thinking of Eastham. We actually got this question this morning from somebody who had seen the Cape Cod Times article. I'm assuming that's where she saw it, and asked us about it. And it looked like she wanted to book. She had contacted us before, but was a little concerned about that fact. So you're thinking at this point that Eastham is not really pushing to do a minimum stay of 14 days.
That's been my stance of what we've been talking about in the We Need Vacation office, is just that would be a huge disruption to not just homeowners, but to anybody, realtors, property managers, and then the impact of that on local businesses and the economy. So that's a big, big question. I could see the conversation would be a little different if it was a 7-day minimum. Then you start to impact even shorter stays, long weekends, and so forth. Still would be a big impact, but 14 days would be a big disruption. So I just think that if the state comes out with guidelines that do not set the minimums, I do not see that there would be restrictions down to the town level. I can't say it won't happen, but it'd be difficult to see that coming true.
In addition, I'd like to add that, we were all ready to send out an email to all Wellfleet homeowners with this, mentioning this and urging them to contact their select board members, et cetera, about the limitation possibility. But then we listened to Julian Sear, Senator Julian Sear, and Representative Sarah Peake, both of whom expressly said they are opposed to any town coming out with their own restrictions, and that the goal here has always been consistency across the board as much as possible. And so they would really be opposed to this, and I think and I think Wellfleet would be under great pressure not to do that.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up, Kenneth Johnson. Unmute you.
Yes, hi, it's Cindy Johnson, sorry.
Cindy, how are you?
I'm at Edgartown, and just a couple of things. Number one, did you come out with a cleaning list that our cleaning people could fill out and leave for the renters?
That's one of the pieces of information that we'll provide. We're shooting for Saturday to provide a checklist that will include guidelines that your cleaning folks can follow, or yourself if anyone's doing their own cleaning.
Great. So you think it'll be this Saturday then? Okay,
We hope,
wonderful. Yeah. The other thing, I think it was in regard to the previous person, the governor, I think it was last Friday, I listened to his press conference, and he again came out with the quarantine thing that's confusing everyone. And one of the press people asked him a question, how on earth are you going to do that when you're telling hotels that? And he said, no, it's only recommended. He said, all we're trying to do is stay consistent with the other New England states. We don't expect people to quarantine for 2 weeks. He can't do that with hotels in the state of Massachusetts.
Right.
So that's it. But he's confusing everyone by saying that.
Yeah,
New York State doesn't do that.
It's a confusing guidance, and at this point, because it is just a recommendation rather than a requirement, we have to treat each situation on its own, and hope. I don't think it's something that can be enforced. It
certainly can't. Yeah, it certainly can't for the islands.
No, and I think, and that's why I switch it on to, okay, you make the statement that this is what the government's urging, and focus on what are some of the other safety guidelines that you would recommend for while staying at your home and while going out somewhere else on the vineyard. These are some of the other guidelines that you should be following. That's what everyone's hoping for. Is how does collectively the summer tourism season begin and everybody stays safe and healthy. So.
Right. And you're very right. When I recommend to my people, and I'm getting asked all the time about rentals now, people want to get away. They really don't care. They want to come anyway. They don't care about the number of hours. They want the beds made. They just want a regular type of service.
Yeah, agree.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anik, I'm going to unmute you.
Anik, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Joe. How are you doing? Couple of things. Where shall I start? Have any of these towns that have, or entities or whatever that have been talking about restrictions, said how they would intend to enforce any restrictions? Because from what I see, I don't think any of what is being possibly thrown out there or proposed by various towns or this or the are enforceable. And I say that because I know what it had. All right, one of my daughters was living recently in Paris, France. Paris was on complete and total 100% lockdown, which meant you had military police out on the streets. No one was allowed to leave their home. So that's not what we're talking about here. I think
Hope not.
it cannot be. I mean, maybe in other parts, but it cannot be. There is no way for the state or any town to enforce people must quarantine for 14 days or people, must do this or must do that, unless you're going to put, some meat on it and have the police out there basically making sure or have things checked. So it's really up to us to do the best we can, in my opinion, to have a quote normal, summer, but do the best we can to prepare our homes to be as absolutely spotlessly clean and desanitized as possible. And the rest of it, it's a lot, to me, it's a lot of blah, blah, blah. Because how do you enforce some of the things that are being thrown out there? I just don't think the state can or would want to, or the towns can or would want to, because there you get into martial law or something. It's just, so, I think the important thing for us is to figure out, okay, how do we make sure, like the gentleman said before, now that he's asking people to write down who's coming, he finds that, oh, it's not really 8, it's going to be 10 and stuff. And I always have a list. I've always for years had a list where on my contract, and I do have a rental contract, that they must sign every page of, initial every page. And at the end, I said, the guest who is ever booking has to fill out the names of every person who's going to show up. That's not just new. This I've had for ages, so that if, I have something, if they show up with more and say, which they don't typically, this is who is supposed to show up, not that. A couple of times it's happened. And so I have, some proof that they weren't being upfront with me. And then the other thing too is how do you make it as clean as possible? There are on YouTube some pretty good sites about how to clean, where they show you someone, and it's actually a lot, sanitizing is a lot more, it's not difficult, it's just, there's a little more to it than even I'd imagine. It's not just spray, but there's a lot of information out there. I would also highly recommend, the other thing I think, by the way, that is, again, unenforceable really, unless the towns require you to give names of people coming, which is what we were fighting against when they were, that whole, with the whole registration and last year with all the short-term tax. But having a 24-hour gap between renters, to me also is, one, not enforceable, and two, not even necessary, depending on whether you do your own cleaning or you have a cleaning service. If you do your own cleaning, you might need a few more hours to really do it right. If you have a cleaning service, you have to make sure that your cleaning service isn't so overwhelmed with clients that they cannot give it the extra hour or hour and a half or whatever it's going to take. So, but I would also highly recommend that people, if you don't have extra sets of things like blankets or comforters or whatever, that you make the investment now to get them, so that when you're changing things out, because I'm asked all the time, I know obviously you're going to change the sheets, but are you also going to change the blankets or clean the blanket? Well, I'm not going to clean them within the 4 hours, between renters, or 6 hours between renters. What I do is I have a second set of comforter or blanket or quilt for every bed. So everything goes out and everything brand new, laundered, comes in. So I know I'm not really asking a question. I'm just like,
but good. It's good advice, Anik. Good advice, good recommendations. A lot packed in there. I think on the enforcing, you're right. I mean, a lot of these regulations and restrictions, I mean, house to house, how can you actually enforce that? It's hard, but in years past, as you mentioned, the number of people going to a house, you know, you also have to realize that your neighbors may be enforcing some of those restrictions if it's like, if you're having a party at the house or having too many people. But in terms of enforcing these new guidelines, I think the way I look at it is, while they're not necessarily enforceable by law and by the town and officials are not coming by, the thing to look at is, this is more turn it around to your guests are coming in and how to ensure that they are having both a safe and enjoyable experience. So it's about the guest experience. So
Well, I think that we would do every year, regardless of the virus.
It's just
one extra thing that we have to deal with, which is to set, you know, make them feel comfortable, not with blah, 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 but with really showing them, look, I have, you know, extra things I have set, this is what I'm going to leave you, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep. That's the main thing. Everybody's going to be doing different methods and procedures to ensure the safety and adhere to certain guidelines. Some people will put 24 hours in between rentals. Some will just extend their turnover time to 6 or 8 hours. Whatever you decide to do, communicate it with your guests so that their expectations are met and they are walking in understanding what some of these new restrictions may be, and they understand, here are the cleaning protocols that we've taken. If they walk in understanding this is what's going to be done, they start off their vacation, you know, feeling comfortable walking in. So, I think we lost your audio there. So I think you're back on mute. I'm gonna. No, you are on mute. I'll let you jump back, Anika. I'll let you jump back on, but I can't hear your audio right now, and I just have a pile up of other hands here. So I'll come back to you at the end if you still have another point to make. Let me move on to Candace Miller.
Hi.
Hi, Candace.
Just on that, before I go to my question on that theme, I thought I'd just share a couple things about the cleaning process. After discussing with my cleaning people what they're going to be doing, just they are, first of all, requiring that all the cleaning supplies, vacuum, everything be at the house, rather than them bringing a vacuum with them from house to house, or cleaning supplies, mop, pail, all of that stuff. So they will bring nothing from house to house, which I think is a good idea. So that basically requires me to have, I've got a few houses, so it requires me to make sure that I have the vacuum and all of that stuff in every house, which I didn't before. The other thing I did was, because disinfectant stuff is basically not available here in Nantucket at the grocery store, I ordered by the gallon a couple different hospital disinfectants which can be diluted. I ordered a few because I didn't know what they would smell like, but you know, in preparation for diluting them and creating the smaller containers to be in each house. So, but you know, I'm thinking that's a good idea. The other thing I've heard from other people is one of the best things you can do is to open all the windows and ventilate the house. So, and that's the reason being outside is better than being inside. So if you do that for a few hours and have good ventilation, that's just a safety good thing to do. So I encourage people to do that as they go through the cleaning process. So one thing I have is the temperature gun that they have in the airports. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to use that, but I'm thinking about potentially telling people a week before they come, things like, there'll be a little temperature screening before you show up. If you feel sick, don't come. I don't know if that maximum of 10 people is going to stand after June 6th or 8th, because I have houses that hold 12. So that's a question I have.
So let's address it just again for the sake of addressing some of these things. I do want to address, that's a great question on the limit of the 10 or more. Joan, I'm going to call on you for a second here. Your thoughts on the limitation of 10. Is there a guidance on a limitation of 10 per household? what's the rules here?
Well, I've been hearing it in terms of gatherings, groups of people at the beach and other areas, no more than 10 people. But I have not heard anyone address the question of a home that accommodates more than 10 people. If you have a home that accommodates 12 people, I don't think you're being told that you have to tell 2 people not to come.
Okay, I figured it's a family unit, and
Yeah.
I assume that's the case. Okay, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah.
I appreciate the notion about contact tracing and getting a list of people, whether I ask for that. I'm thinking now, should I ask for that in advance? And maybe yes, after this conversation. So that was good information. And the one thing that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm encountering this because I'm working on COVID testing throughout the state for other things, and it doesn't make sense for this either, is that these limitations, quarantine, whatever it is for people who are out of state. So that's my understanding of the way they read.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth of it is, Massachusetts, all over Massachusetts, Boston, Worcester, wherever, has had a lot of cases, including the Cape. So, you know, it seems, I guess they didn't want to make it for Massachusetts, the governor, but it should be, there's no reason to say people from Boston, for instance, shouldn't have to quarantine, but people from Maine do.
Right.
So
No,
I think
again,
originally this was a restriction placed on people coming from the real hot spots like New York City,
Right.
coming in April and coming in March and April. So I think that they, you know, it just continued to be the case. But I agree with you.
Yeah. For the sake, just to jump in for the sake of time, I just have a bunch of hands left in the time remaining, so I'm going to continue moving on. Thank you, Candace. Let me move on to Liz Tavares here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim and Joan, for a great presentation, really helpful stuff. I've got some homeowners who are concerned about liability, and I think you may have talked about this at the last session. They're concerned so much that they want to put together a hold harmless clause where it would relieve them from any liability should the tenant or the renter contract COVID-19. What is your position on that? Is that something you want to put out there and have your renter sign and say that I'm not going to sue you in the event that I come down with this virus?
Joan, do you want to take it?
Most of us have in our lease an indemnification clause. If you see our sample lease, it's, I believe, clause number 16. And in there, it states that the homeowner will not be held responsible if there are any health issues during the guest stay or after. And this year we just added the words including viruses to that clause. But and your guests sign that lease. Now, does it totally make you immune from any kind of legal action? I mean, nothing does really, but I think most people would agree that it would be very difficult for a vacationer, a guest, to prove that they got the virus while at your house. I mean, they left your house, they may have stopped somewhere on the way home, they must have been out and about while on vacation. So there's just no way of proving how they came down with it. And it's mostly from person to person contact anyway. And at the house, they are in contact with people who they obviously know, and you know, they could have gotten it from one of them.
All right, thank you, Liz. Moving on to Lisa from an iPad.
Right, hi, good evening.
Hi.
I'm sitting here in lockdown in London, so I'm not getting all the latest pronouncements from the state of Massachusetts or anywhere else, really. So my home is in Provincetown, and my question is this. The traffic through the website has been off the scale since I unblocked a whole lot of time for people who have deferred to next year. And we've also had to postpone a family wedding, and we had a certain amount of time blocked off for that. So suddenly a house that is never available has opened up like crazy. And I've had a lot of inquiries, and I have been saying, I'm waiting for the governor's pronouncement on the 8th, because I blocked everything off through the 8th of June, knowing that there were no short-term rentals then. But from the sound of things, as I've been listening, it seems that everyone seems fairly positive that there are going to be rentals opening up. And I'm just wondering whether I should convert some of these very positive inquiries into a rental and go through the paperwork and take a deposit and so forth on the assumption that from the 8th, and I only do weekly rentals, that you can, rent for a week or more. And I just wondered what your view was, or whether I'm being, jumping the gun before. Now I hear it's Saturday he's making the announcement, not Monday. So it's a little difficult at this remove to know exactly what the situation is.
Right. Well, I think the governor put out the preview of the guidelines a week in advance last Friday for this very reason, so that businesses and technically even vacation rentals could review what those guidelines are in advance of opening it back up. So I think the confidence level that they're going to open up, they are going to open up. Is it going to be June 8th? Likely yes. I mean, technically, the most risky rental is June 8th or June 15th or whatever in the first couple of weeks, just because there could be some wiggle room if the health data says let's not open it up right away. But I think there's pretty good confidence that there's going to be a summer for July and August rentals. I think you should feel comfortable proceeding with those. Especially if its guests are.
I guess my question was, there's been a lot of June interest, and that has concerned me because, obviously I have no idea.
I think, next week, if you had a booking for next week, that would be the one I'd be a little wary about it, because you don't know exactly what day they're going to start. So focus on making sure that you can do a quick turnover or a quick procedure to get those funds electronically, sign a lease electronically if you can, or just something to do it quickly. You could always sign a lease in advance too. So you could always sign the lease without a down payment and just and collect the funds when on starting. We're only 3 days away from knowing for sure when this is going to be.
And on Saturday, when there is hopefully more certainty, will you be sending something out so that over here at least I can see what the current immediate updated position is?
Yes, definitely. We will be sending something out probably Saturday afternoon. So,
okay, thank you very much. That's it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, don't know, H.R. Sullivan is the name on here. I'll unmute you. H.R. Sullivan, are you here? Unmute. You might have to click unmute on your end.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, there you are. Hi.
Hi, I'm Helen. I should put someone on there, yeah.
That's right.
So I was reading the regs on mass.gov. They're there for short-term rentals, and it's all very doable, except for a few things. First of all, they want you to wash all the comforters before each guest. Now, I have nice big comforters. I get new ones every year, and there's no way they can be washed for every person that comes in. So do you have any recommendations? My cleaning service does a lot, cleaning, but he doesn't do the laundry. My tenants bring in their own sheets, but I have the pillows and I have the comforters. It also says you need pillow covers on all pillows, and that they have to be exchanged and new ones put on every time a new tenant comes in. So what do you,
Yeah, no, Helen, thank you for that question. I'm going to actually throw that over to Joan on this one. We were just talking about it. It's a tricky question about the comforters, but Joan, you want to take a stab at the linens and guidance?
We've looked at that and been concerned about it too, and have discussed it ad nauseum. Remember that these are considered best practices. These are recommended best practices. It doesn't mean you absolutely have to do it, but this is what they're advising you to do. So we were talking to Lauren a little while ago, one of our staff members, associates, and she said that she is removing all of the comforters, but just leaving blankets that, lightweight blankets that can be laundered just at the end of the bed. Some people are removing bedspreads. Again, I think it's such an individual thing, and I think that you just have to, as far as the pillow protectors, I saw that too, that you should change those. You know, some people are capable of doing that. Some homeowners are there at their home working along with their cleaning staff, and so they can do those practices. They can put those in place. Others cannot. I think you just have to do the best you can. And again, if you have, this is where communication with your individual renters comes in place. You contact them if they start asking questions about this and say, well, are you changing, you know, are you laundering everything in between? You can just tell them, if you don't feel comfortable, bring blankets of your own or pillows of your own. If you don't, we want you to feel perfectly comfortable. This is what we're doing, but you know, you can bring your own items too. But most guests are not going to be awfully concerned about that.
No mention was made of bath mats, so I don't know. Do you have any advice on those? I mean,
well, those are usually changed on a weekly basis, I think. So, again, I mean, I just, where do you draw the line with all of this? You know, carpets, right. You know, I just think the risk of infection from, of a virus from a bath mat or a carpet, you know, is very low.
Yes, definitely. All right, thank you, Helen. I'm gonna move on to Kristen. Thank you for waiting. I'm gonna unmute you. Are you there, Kristen?
Mm-hmm. Hi, thank you so much. As quick as I can, the question goes back to the gatherings of 10. My issue is a party of 8 renting my house, flying in actually, and then another party of extended family, and they wanted to bring that party and the dogs over, and it's in the lease and everything. I think that's against the gatherings of 10 rule now, and I will enforce rules. Can you comment on that? Did I read that right?
Were you saying that there'd be a party of 8, but then they're bringing in 8 guests for the day?
They would
or
just, you know, gathering for the days, not at overnight.
Sure. I would think that's probably against. I mean, that's really where the guidance of gatherings of 10, whether it be at the beach or at an event or really in this case at a house. I think that's where 10 really would be enforced, or you would want to enforce that rule.
And I see somebody quickly in the chat mention gatherings of family, but this is extended family. They're across the country. They are not.
Right.
They're not housed together. So
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's a tough one. It's
I don't want to lie to them and say.
Right. By the standard of the rule, that's what the government is guidance is recommending against gatherings of 10. You know.
That's it.
You're welcome. All right. All right. Tatiana, thank you for waiting here. Unmute you. Hi, Tatiana. You there?
Hi.
Hi.
So following up on what Kristen's comment was or question was, when we have people, so our family or our home holds 6 people anyway, ideally, but if you were to have a few couples that come in and so they're not even in the same household, that also, as I understand it, is kind of against protocols, CDC protocols, and would pose a risk to the island and to those people themselves. So how are people handling that? I mean, is that kind of do you big brother that, or are we overlooking that, or what's your advice on that?
Joan, has there been any guidance on have you seen any guidance on families coming together or set friends, groups, other groups that are not families?
I think that that's up to the individuals. You know, I just, if you're friends and you all feel comfortable, you know, gathering as friends and family, I just think it's really a very individual thing.
That's going to be very common.
And I think it will probably happen a lot, especially this summer, you know, as things loosen up.
Right. I think that's the key. Things are loosening up. And so what might not have happened a month or two ago if rentals were permitted, I think you'll see the expansion of that. You know, provided it's in smaller groups, I think it's something that we'll see happening. So thank you, Tatiana. All right, I got a few more questions here in the short time we have left. Jan Allen, I'm going to unmute you. Jan, Rick, and Carol are left. Jan, are you there? You might need to unmute on your end. Jan, can you hear me? All right, I'll come back to you. Let's go to Rick. I feel like I'm on a rate. Oh, yes. Hold on, Rick. Jan, I see you there. Yes.
So I just have a quick question about registering our house in Wellfleet. I never knew about that. So I should register the house. Is that correct?
I don't think it's determined yet. I think there's going to be another meeting on the 9th.
Okay. All right. All right. That's all. Thank you very much.
All right. All right, Rick, I'm going to go to you now.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I missed the meeting last week, but I know a couple weeks ago, Joan indicated that there was a large spike in the inquiries. And I'm just curious what those conversion rates are from those inquiries to rentals, because we've seen a large spike as well. Unfortunately, we have gotten no rentals and it, you know, since that spike has occurred. So I'm just curious what everyone else is seeing, or Joan, what you can see from your website in terms of number of inquiries now that they're up, actually converting into actual rentals.
Mm-hmm. I've heard from a few people, Rick, who have said that they've gotten a lot of inquiries and they respond and then they don't hear anything. And we feel that there are a number of factors involved here. First, I think people, this is truly last minute that people are booking, and we normally see an uptick in even July. But I think that a lot of people are panicking in a way because they really want to get a home, sometimes for much more than a week, and they realize that they've got to cast a wider net and put out more inquiries than they normally do. So if you don't hear back, that may be the reason. They're looking around, and sometimes they don't pay as much attention to the listing and ask you questions about, such as, can I bring my dog, when clearly you say no pets, that kind of thing. So it's not uncommon. But I think that if you get an inquiry and it sounds like a good one, I'd recommend, if they've given you the phone number, call them, because sometimes the first pleasant voice on the phone will get the worm.
Okay, that's fine. But have you seen an increase in bookings over the last 2 weeks?
Yes,
with the number? With the number,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll need to run, Rick, we'll need to run updated booking numbers to see, but we are seeing, a lot of these, they are converting. The numbers themselves, as you mentioned, you've seen a lot of interest, and, I think so far the interest level has been a catch up from when we hit the bottom during March and April, and so it's, May basically brought us back up to speed. I would hope that there's going to yet be another conversion of inquiries here when the actual rental ban is lifted. Then we'll start to see, okay, now you at least take that out of the equation, that the renters don't have to be concerned that, should I book a home or not? Should I just inquire just to see what's out there? Once the rental ban is lifted, hopefully that'll help to convert some of these other people that may be on the fence and not willing to commit right now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. All right, last one on the list is Carol Ritzman. I'm going to unmute you.
Okay. I had a question. Our rental houses in Orleans. We live in Illinois. I've talked to several tenants, they're not too worried about the cleaning. They want to come, but the questions I was asked is about the beach restrictions. And I haven't heard anything about that this last hour. What
Sure.
all I can tell them is I don't know yet, and there are a lot of speculations there. So.
Right. Well, Carol, you mentioned the town of Orleans, and so I think why some of why it hasn't been brought up yet is that it's very specific town to town. Our recommendation would be to go to the town-based websites for the most up-to-date. I think a lot of this information is changing pretty quickly because all these beaches have to be implementing new rules. It's recommended by the state that everybody implement contactless ticketing systems where possible. And so think about these towns have never done this before. All of a sudden they need to do this in short order. So I would expect a lot of this to change. I think specifically for the town of Orleans, knowing Nauset Beach, you can say to them if you're near Nauset Beach or if that's something desirable for your tenants, that the capacity there is going to be reduced. The parking is going to be down probably 50%. So, that's not probably a place where they should, unless they're willing to show up at 7 a.m. I don't know what that's going to be like. It's an unknown. So you have to go to the website to see what the restrictions are going to be. Again, it depends on where you are in Orleans, which beach you're nearest to see what those restrictions will be. We're going to be providing links on our beach page to the town pages so that there will be you can get up-to-date information easily from that way too.
Okay.
And the chambers will have information as well.
Okay. Right? Will they have it yet, or are they also waiting for these other guidelines to?
Some do.
Yeah. Can I ask one other quick question? And that goes back to the people who are trying to rent on like a bargain hunters. Is there a concern with the I want to say maybe the type of people who are making those requests, that they're less than stellar tenants? I guess I could put it that way. We had trouble with that one year, and I just was wondering if that's a thought.
I think in relation to kind of the uptick I think you're seeing an uptick in all types of vacationers' inquiries. You have people that are looking for long-term, people looking for multiple weeks or just the standard week or short-termers, and then you have people that are looking for a deal. I think you're seeing an uptick across the board. And it's been a common question on the chat board this week, and you don't have to accept any of that. You don't need to lower price. You don't need to lower their demands, and I wouldn't really look to lower price or lower to their demands yet. Vacationers the demand is growing now because of the last few months, and the months of June and July I expect to be strong like they have been in years past. So I think you have the upper hand to a degree right now. That you don't need to take every inquiry that comes your way, and especially if they're looking for a deal.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Carol. All right, I think we are reaching the end. Joan, anything else to add?
No, we'll just wait and see what the governor says on Saturday, and we will let you know right away. You'll probably listen in too. I just would like to say that I think that the summer, in my mind, and from where we stand, seems to be looking much better than I had once feared back in March and April. We really were thinking that it would be a 50% kind of summer where, many of us had many empty weeks, and it just doesn't appear to be the case. So I'm optimistic.
Me too. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We will rejoin for those that would like to see what the aftermath of the announcement on Saturday is going to be. We'll do this again next Wednesday. If you're interested, we'll send around the email on Tuesday for you to join. Stay tuned. Thank you for joining. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.